Hi everyone, welcome back to Tallulah Talks. That is me. It is Sunday today, so it is time for Sunday's Haunting Hour. So this is the case of a house known as Hinsdale House. It is in the small town of Hinsdale, I think Illinois, in America. And I actually caught wind of this on TikTok, and it is actually known as America's most haunted home. Although people say that about a lot of homes in like America, UK, blah blah blah. So, but yeah, so it actually caught my eye, and I got most of my information off of a YouTube video because I couldn't really find much in the case of the family that lived there online on Google. So I watched a YouTube video. I will tag it in the comments. So let's go into the history of the home. It is located in Hinsdale, Illinois, and was built in 1873 by William LeBaron. He was known as a prominent architect, and Hinsdale, the home, was actually one of the first homes built using steel as the framing in the USA. It was originally built for John Hinsdale, and the house actually remained in his family for many generations. It was then sold to new owners in the early 20th century, so the 1970s. The home was then declared a local landmark. That is all I got on the history. So, in the garden of the home, there is a hanging tree, a pond that had allegedly claimed one life, and in the wooded areas, many noises have been heard. Claire and Phil Dandy lived in the home with their children in the 1970s, and the activity was actually said to be quite frequent. At one point, they called Father Alphonsus to help. The priest performed an exorcism, at which point the activity kind of stopped, but then it came back tenfold. So the family said, quote, "The house started shaking and sounded like a crying noise. A screaming noise came from the windows," end quote. It is said that during their time in the home, the family were haunted by what they felt was a malicious spirit. They would hear disembodied voices, they would see apparitions of a young girl and a young boy, and the family would actually become ill quite a lot throughout. After years of visiting the rural community, the family decided to buy a home in Hinsdale. Wife Claire believed that the family got on better when they holidayed to the country, and so this is why she wanted to live there. The family were pleasantly surprised by the sort of vastness of the home and the land surrounding it. Claire described feeling at peace when viewing the home, and the home was actually at this point over 100 years old. I don't know why she felt at peace considering the activity that happens later, but this is what she said. The house to her emanated charm and elegance, and as children kind of explored the grounds, the couple continued the tour of the home. They were being shown the storage space underneath the home, known as a crawl space, and the door initially stuck. After several attempts, the door then opened and revealed a really dusty space with a fireplace. However, it didn't really fit in with the decor of the home, and Claire stated that something like this just made her feel very uneasy, but again, I'm not entirely sure why. On to the next page, if we can turn it. Oh, joy of reading notes. So, unsure as to why the crawl space looked so desolate and dark, they just didn't know why. It didn't match the house's energy at all. This contributed to her feelings of a city upbringing, so this is what she just put it down to, and that's why it made her feel uneasy. After closing the space, the feelings of peace returned. It was decided that they would purchase the home, and on moving day, Claire's brother actually helped the family move in. When opening the door of the home, a horde of insects actually greeted him, coming flying at his face, and bees and flies just came at him. He was then startled to see hundreds of dead bees in the main room, and more surprised to see hundreds of alive bees in the the sort of window panes. He found this really odd due to the time of the year. It was really cold, and bees typically, obviously, don't come out in this type of weather. He told the family what he found. However, they decided to get rid of all the insects, or at least what they could. And then the family started to move in, and again, they all seemed at peace with their new living situation. One day when their son Mike was exploring the woods with his friends, they spotted another young boy carrying a gun. The boy allegedly yelled that they were on his property, and all the boys actually noticed that the boy is transparent and like half of his head was missing, so maybe from some sort of accident. The boys then followed him to a lake, and at this time he just completely vanished. All three ran back to Mike's home, and they told Claire what they saw. However, Claire was very quick to dismiss this, obviously being the matriarch of the family. Typically, we like to put it towards something else. Weeks later, Claire was walking the dog Madison in the woods. She then begins to hear chanting, and she actually stops to listen to it, describing it as very eerie and disembodied. At this time, the dog was getting very agitated. She began to growl, and the longer Claire focused on the chanting, the louder it actually became. So at this point, the dog became free of Claire's grasp and ran straight home. Claire then sort of broke free of the, whatever sort of trance she was in, and she chased the dog and only stopped running when she got to the house. When telling her husband what she heard, he again dismissed her like she dismissed her son. She discusses it with Mike, and they basically just couldn't come up with any sort of explanation. The one explanation that the dad came up with, Phil, was that it could have been campers. So Mike and his friend venture back out into the woods to see if they can find any campers, but they didn't actually hear anything. As they made their way back home, however, they heard what sounded like an axe thudding on one of the trees nearby. And at this point, they heard a woman scream. Both boys then ran home and actually bumped into Mike's dad. And again, they told him about this, but, he just dismissed it. The family continued about their normal life. They mostly ignored the weird experiences that would happen in the land surrounding the home. One day, Claire actually decided to stay at home while the rest of the family went away. She just wanted some alone time. So while she is curled up on the couch reading her book, the window was open, so there was like a little bit of a breeze, but not enough to kind of make any sort of impact. She is suddenly startled when a window just slams shut by itself. And again, the breeze wasn't really enough to do this. So she investigated, and she couldn't really make sense as to why the window did this. And again, she kind of just dismisses it, because when you're in a situation like that, you kind of find alternative explanations. A few nights later, as Mike, her son, is sleeping, he is woken up by a chess game that had fallen on top of his chest. The shelf is directly above him, and so he obviously was startled awake, and he kind of looked up to see if the shelf was broken. However, at this point, he actually saw several boxes moving of their own accord to the edge of the shelf. The largest box on the shelf suddenly flew across the room, smacking him in the chest. This obviously scares Mike, and he calls for Claire. Claire then examines the pile and actually becomes scared when she sees a smaller box flying across the room. This causes them both to scream and to run out of the room. Claire at this point believes that whatever her and her son heard in the woods has actually followed them home. And this is when they decide for the first time to reach out to a local priest. This was Father Alphonsus. He worked at the University of St. Bonaventure, and he told them that he believed the activity could possibly be a poltergeist. So poltergeists essentially are ghosts that can move objects, and this is typically what they do. Arrangements were then made for the priest to come and bless the home. On April 3rd, 1975, the blessing began, and this was, the family was included in this, and they gathered together. So as the priest begins to speak, a series of wailing and moaning can be heard throughout the home. The smell of burning completely enveloped the home, and the priest then began to also bless the crawl space, because that is where Claire felt very uneasy. During this time, the house just suddenly went silent, and seemingly the blessing had worked. 3 months later, however, quote, all hell broke loose. Claire was woken by a series of knocks coming from inside the walls of the home. Imagine how terrifying that must have been. The knocks were then joined by whispers, and Claire sort of, again, to investigate, made her way to the main level. This is when, for the first time, she sees the figure of a young girl walking by the stairs. The young girl then makes her way to the crawl space, opening the door, going in and closing it behind her. Claire makes her way to the crawl space to see who the little girl was, opens the door, and there was nothing there. So she quickly goes back upstairs and makes her way to her daughter's room to make sure it wasn't her, and the daughter's like fast asleep in bed. The following morning, her daughter Tina wakes up to feed her pets and notices her bird isn't being very vocal. And if you have birds, you will know they are very, very vocal. You have heard my bird on a few of these videos. He loves making noise. So when they're not being vocal, it is very odd. She looks around to find her bird staring at the corner of the room, and when she went to glance back at her mirror, she saw the apparition of a young girl. The girl's face was described as being sunk in, and her eyes were gone. Tina at this point then screamed, startling everyone awake. Claire at this point realised the blessings hadn't actually worked and calls the father again to, explain what had happened. Unfortunately, the priest is very busy right now and he can't come for like a week. He promises to come to the home as soon as he can, and this time he would bring a paranormal expert. As they wait the sort of next week for the priest, Claire attempts to kind of keep the family calm. While Claire and Phil are spending the night watching a movie and the kids are away, they hear a crash outside their home. So the couple run outside to investigate, and they step towards where they believe they heard the crash, only to hear it again. But thankfully, it was just a bunch of raccoons in their like trash cans. They were relieved by this and they made their way back inside. However, suddenly they saw the figure of a young girl staring out at them through their living room window. Rushing inside, they go to Tina's room and they actually find her back home completely incoherent, staring into her mirror. Oh my god, what is wrong with me today? They attempt to get her attention, but she remains unresponsive, and they actually now notice that her bright blue eyes have turned black. They begin to shake her and yell her name, and Tina eventually wakes up, not remembering how she even got home from her friend's house. The couple then hear movement in Mike's room, and so Phil tells the girls to stay in Tina's room. He then goes to investigate, but at this time the phone rings and Claire answers the phone. And it's Mike who's on the phone asking to stay at his friend's, and when his mum tells him what's just happened, him and his friend Randy rush home. Randy would later tell that Mike's hands were sweating and he was really shaky driving home that night. The boys arrive to find chaos. Phil wants to fight the entities and fight for his home, while the girls are staying very close together trying to comfort each other. All the lights at this point in the house go off, and the family then hears banging and scratching coming from the crawl space. Phil, with a flashlight, makes his way towards this room and actually finds the fireplace completely, like, disassembled, and the bricks are actually piled quite neatly in the middle of the room. Claire then calls the priest again, explaining what's happened, and he comes right away. He brings paranormal expert Alex Tennant, and he is was a well-respected researcher and psychic. After coming to the home, the family take them into the crawl space, and Alex only knew, like, the bare minimum. He didn't know the specifics of what had taken place. He didn't know about the ghostly apparitions, blah, blah, blah. So when he stepped into this room, he actually began having visions, and he claims that he saw many dead bodies stacked in the room. Alex then explains what he saw and believes that some deaths were actually down to murder. Based on his vision, he believed the home used to be a stopping point for the stagecoaches way back. And he also believed that there was a gang living nearby who would lure in travellers and kill them and then hide them in the crawl space. The bodies were then placed in the crawl space until they could be buried. It was believed that there were 7 different spirits trapped inside the home, and they were all within the home, and so the priest began to pray for their lost souls to find peace. When the men leave, Claire again feels hopeful that things are going to be okay. Mike and Randy are still skeptical of the investigator, and so they actually find a map and find that he was right, that there were stagecoaches that used to go by the home. And so they then went out to see where these would be. As the boys followed what used to be the trail tracks, they then actually saw orbs of light nearby in the nearby trees. Randy, at this point, stayed the night, and Claire spent the night crying after what the boys had told her, because she's at this point feeling very hopeless. The family couldn't move due to all their money being in the house, and the following day Mike took Randy home. However, hours went by and Mike still wasn't home, and this was like very odd. The police at this point knocked on the door, informing the family of an accident and they needed to get to the hospital right away. They informed the couple that Mike had lost control of his car and crashed it in a ditch, and he was currently undergoing emergency surgery. He had extensive head injuries, a ruptured spleen, and had actually lost at this point a lot of blood. An officer explained that Randy had actually been dropped off at that point, and so the car crash happened as Mike was making his way home. While in the ambulance, it was reported that Mike repeated that someone else was in the car with him, however, no one else was found. After 2 weeks in a coma, Mike woke with no memory of the crash. And unfortunately, the paranormal activity did continue. And again, the father came back to the home, but this time him and the investigator performed an exorcism without the family being there. Alex and the priest cleansed the home. And during the cleansing, Alex again had many visions, and many of the ghosts within the home had died very horribly due to war, illness, or murder. Another spirit in Tina's room, she was a very, very angry spirit, and it is thought that she was the one behind most of the activity. She was described as very possessive, and she outright refused to move on. The priest decided to perform an exorcism at this point, and as he did this, the house shook very violently. He heard wailing and moaning and heard bangs throughout the home. Once the rites had been read, the house then seemed at peace once again, and after a while, the haunting began again. The family at this point decided to declare bankruptcy and took their losses and moved. It was at this point the home was then bought by Daniel Klaes, who is a renowned paranormal investigator, and to this day he still owns it, but the house is now open for tours. So yeah, it seems that, Jesus, the family went through hell, and even after quite a few blessings, I guess the spirits just didn't want to move on. If you visited this house, please let me know. I think it'd be really interesting to hear your experiences. I found this was quite an interesting one to research. If you have any sort of hauntings you want me to research, please leave them